confirm that everything should be fine now. Congratulations. Okay. They say audio is good. Woo! All right. So let me just tell. We had a streaming issue. It should be fine now. All right. I just said that on Slack. So I just wanted to show Nikolas for the first time how it is. So I was struggling with Prisma for 4 years. He had to struggle for half an hour. It's not that bad, right? Right? No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. So again, sorry everyone. I'm super sorry that we had streaming issues. I had some dumb audio program running on Windows, and maybe that's what butchering the audio. I have no idea. Welcome to another stream. Hi from India. Hi whoever's watching Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. Welcome. We're doing the Friday stream again. I have Nikolas Burke here. Thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. That's a great opportunity to clarify a lot of things about Prisma and talk about your frustrations from a couple of days ago.
Let's just let people ease in before we actually start talking about that shit. People are already starting with questions, Vamshi and so on. We're going to discuss a bunch of questions. We're basically going to pick some questions to answer. We're not going to answer everything. Let's just ease people in. Let's just give people time to settle. Last time I saw Nick, we went out for a dinner. When was this, dude? I'm losing track of time with this Corona shit. I have no idea.
I think November or December. Like, was it for React Day Berlin?
It was for React Day Berlin, I think.
So then it must have been in December, I think.
Yeah,
and we
holy
went out
shit.
with Johannes, with Flavian, and we had dinner together, yeah.
So that's my second time out with the Prisma team. Previously, it was with the GraphCool team. Were you with us? You were with us, right?
Yeah.
It was me,
we went
you...
out for lunch once, but that's 3 years ago.
Yeah, that time.
2.5.
That time. I still remember that, like, you invited me to the office and you were like, oh, just join in that building. And then who were you sharing the building with? I know there were a bunch of bigger names than you there. I don't know, some bigger companies.
We had actually, yeah. So the Uber Germany office was in there. They were in there, but like not the technical department, so no engineers, but the people who dealt with the drivers.
Oh.
It was actually funny because they were on on another floor in the same building, and they had a lot of the applicants for driver positions like coming in regularly and had only like restricted business hours, and a lot of these drivers used to ring the bell at Prisma or like at GraphCool at our office, and we had to tell them, no, we're not Uber and we cannot let you in. It was always kind of funny.
But we can host your database for you if you want to, even if you pay us money. So that was 3 years ago. Holy shit. Yeah, so I went out with the GraphCool team first time 3 years ago, and then we met again a couple of months ago. Good times. Remember times when you could go out and meet with people? Good times. It's been crazy, man. How are you dealing with the entire Corona thing in Berlin? What's going on?
Overall in Berlin, I think it's we're in the process of trying to lift a couple of the restrictions. So I think in a couple of weeks, limited events will be possible again, that you can gather with like 50 people, and like whoever hosts the event has to keep track of all the participants, so that if there is a Corona case, that they can kind of try to understand where it broke out, and then
just how it spreads
what
and stuff.
kind of the infection chain was, right? So that's kind of happening at the moment. And like as to how we're dealing with it at Prisma, it's just that everybody's working from home, but I feel really grateful that kind of other than that, it's not really affecting our business. Because we are like working with developers, and like, you know yourself, you spend more time at home now and you have more time to build stuff. So actually our target audience is actually the ones that actually still keeps working. So that's kind of nice and a very fortunate position to be in if I hear what's happening.
Absolutely. Like when I see web devs, I'm not saying that not everyone should complain about the Corona situation online, but we're the last people that we should complain about it, because we get to keep our jobs, keep doing what we're doing. I even see people like the productivities in all companies are just skyrocketing. So did you had like a work from home day before or something? Did you have some limit on working from home, or how was it? Because I know you have a bunch of remote people that work for you, even before this happened, right? You have a bunch of remote people that work for Prisma.
We have like a handful of people that are remote, like from everywhere in the world. So India, the US, Canada, France. So like really a handful of people that are not in Berlin. And before the Corona situation, we used to have like the focus day, where 1 week, like 1 day per week, everybody could just work from home basically. And now we are all working from home for a
and it's
longer
fine,
period
right?
of time, and that's is working just as well. So
Would you
really
be a douche
like,
and go
from
back
home
to the
too.
company and tell people, look, it was what it was. Now you must come to the office. I think everyone who does that is like, I won't understand that, because people were like in my girlfriend's company, they were telling them you can only take 1 day, 2 days per week. And now it's like, oh, it turns out 5 days per week, it's completely fine and her productivity is up. So it would be pretty stupid if they're like, oh, you have to come back to the office. There's no reason. Do you have any plans? I mean, nobody has a plan with this thing, but have you thought about it or?
So like for me personally, I would like certainly appreciate it, but like we'll see how it like turns out on the company level. Maybe if you have Johannes on in a couple of weeks, you can ask him that as well.
Yeah.
But I think in general, it seems like indeed our like productivity hasn't been affected. So I don't see a lot of reasons why we shouldn't be able to have more casual rules there as well.
It would be funny if I have a stream with Johannes in a couple of weeks and he's like, nope, everyone's back in the office. Fuck that, work from home. Oh man. All right, we were actually
appreciate the time in the office. I mean, we have an awesome office, and we have catered lunches there.
Yeah.
So and like it's really nice to be in the office, but I have like a half an hour commute on my bike every day.
Yeah.
So like I also like to not sit on my bike every morning for 30 minutes and in the evening for 30 minutes.
A lot of people miss that though. A lot of people miss their commute to work and stuff. I don't like. It's very sad that for me life hasn't changed just 1%. It's just it's there was a tweet like this that said it's super sad when you realize, oh, this was my lifestyle. Just go walk the dog and that's it. Eventually go to a conference and meet people. So yeah, it is what it is.
That meme.
Yeah. Let's see the chat. I miss my Friday whiskeys at the Passionate People office. It's FAB area. That's not the case. Yeah, it really depends. I saw some people from Google, they were bitching, oh my god, I missed my lunch and people were making coffee for me at Google, so now I cannot make coffee at home. Like, fuck off with that shit. Anyway, what I know a lot of you are eager to jump into the topic and just actually start discussing Prisma stuff. But I just, if you watched my last stream where I used Prisma, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, where I just decided to just stop and reevaluate all the options that I have and maybe take a different directions for some of my projects. So TLDR, I just stopped working on backends overall. It was not like, hey, I'm dropping Prisma, I'm never gonna use it again. So I'm good friends with a bunch of people at Prisma, and that's the only Slack channel that I have available except the CZ Slack channel. I have no idea why. I was thinking about that yesterday. Like, I'm logged into 2 channels, and Prisma is the one that's like, I check all the channels. That never happens. So I don't hold any, grudges, and as you know me, I'm always changing my mind. Like, one day I can say one thing, the next day another thing. One thing that I have to say before we jump into all of this is how cool are the people for Prisma, how cool all of you are, and how cool is the customer service. Like, when I see in your Slack the level of chill that you're maintaining with people that ask questions, I'm like, I could never have this much patience with the biggest customer that we have right now in CZ. I wouldn't have that much patience. Like, no matter what people say, no matter what stupid question they ask in the Slack, no matter which dumbass rants on a stream, oh, Prisma sucks, whatever, you always approach it with like a level-headed mindset. You're like, okay, we're gonna figure it out. Like, after I was done with the stream, somebody from your team, I don't know who it was, because he was in the stream, he actually sent me a refactored version of the schema that I needed. And he was like, hey man, here's the refactored version. Yeah, her shit. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. But I was like, what? Like, if someone rants this much about CZ and then they ask me for my help, I'll be like, fuck off. So I wanted to get that out of the way, that people from Prisma are amazing. And to thank you for doing this. I was supposed to do the stream with Johannes. We're gonna do a stream with Johannes. So thank you for taking the time and actually talking to me about this.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's much appreciated.
Spider has the worst puns. Oh my god. He's like, to put some light on Prisma. It's very colorful. His puns are killing me. Let me see the chat. I want to see Kitze live code Prisma without Nikolas assistance. No, that's not happening now. We're not gonna go we're not gonna do any live coding for now. We just wanted to have like a philosophical like overview of the past, present, the future of Prisma, how things will be and so on. And HTTP Junkie is actually asking the right question. like Nikolas, if they put you in an elevator with someone and you're like, I work for Prisma, and someone is like, cool, what is this? One sentence. What is the elevator pitch for it right now? I wouldn't know.
So the way how I describe it is that Prisma is an open source toolkit for database workflows that you can use to make all your database workflows in Node.js and TypeScript a lot easier. And the current focus is database access, so talking to your database programmatically from a Node or TypeScript application.
I like how well prepared you were for that answer. You were like, if I'm in an elevator, I'm crushing that sentence.
We have been trying to figure that out for the past 2 years. So hopefully we are at a point where we can confidently describe it.
I like ever since we had that lunch 2 years ago, Nikolas wrote the side heading. Ever since we had that lunch, I actually agree with all the decisions that you make. Because I remember when we had that lunch, I had a potato in my mouth, and Niran, or whatever his name was, Niran, he was like, oh, soon we're planning to stop being a database service, like host your own everything, and we're gonna open source everything. And I was like, potato drop. What did you just say? What are you gonna do? But then you explained the decision, and I'm like, okay, a lot of people, including me, are gonna be pissed off, but what you're saying makes sense. And there has been a lot of like mind shift changes and so on. And of course, for people who are just diving in it, it's frustrating to move from it. But I actually agree with all the decisions, because every decision, every turn that you took was just because you saw, okay, if we do it this way, there's going to be this limitation. We're going to hit a wall here. We have to, even though we're going to piss off a lot of people, we're just going to take a turn here and just do it for the... I like that you were like, if you wanted to monetize GraphQL, I was saying that from the beginning. You could monetize GraphQL, just focus on it as a service, just like there's, I don't know, Graph CMS or whatever paid stuff is out there. And you could have been like, we care about money. But it seems to me that you actually care about solving this database shit once and for all. I like that you took that approach with everything.
So it seems like there are a lot of people in the chat that are still like asking about Prisma and Prisma 1, and we will talk about all of that.
We're gonna go there. Yeah, we're gonna go. Yeah.
Like that entire evolution. But maybe we can still talk a little bit about what the main question here, like what is Prisma? And you said that you could open up in the background kind of the website or your browser or something. So like maybe let's go to the Prisma website and just like look at what we see there, and then I can provide a little bit more context on the different parts of Prisma, and then after that we can talk about the evolution, how it relates to GraphQL and all of that.
This is the current. Let me just move you a little bit. This is the current description of it. And of course, this was changed a couple of times. This was changed way too many times. I always like the landing page design though. I'm always impressed. Whoever is doing the landing pages for you is a freaking genius, both design-wise and code-wise. Like this seems super slick. So this is the latest pitch. Modern database access for TypeScript and Node.js. Prisma is an open source database toolkit. But if you allow me to digress for a second, I just wanted to go like from the past and then actually come here.
All right. Or
instead of doing the other way around. So one thing that I wanted to mention, and I see a lot of people online and on Twitter and here and there, they're missing this, is like what I liked, why I fell in love with GraphQL is it was super enabling for people like me who haven't done any database work in the past. I mean, before I started working with GraphQL, I was already working with GraphQL, but we had like a local Postgres database and I actually learned a bunch of SQL and whatever. I was writing the migrations from scratch. And as the app was growing, we reached a point where we couldn't write our resolvers in a sane way. Like a lot of things weren't reusable. It was like the code base became insane. So after a while, I stopped freelancing. I just dropped GraphQL for a while. And then for React Academy, I focused on React Academy and I wanted to build an app for the attendees of my workshops. And I was amazed with GraphQL because I'm that lazy that for 6 months, I didn't build any UI for my backend. I was just using GraphQL UI for managing my workshops. So I would be like, okay, everyone can register now and now go take a coffee break. And I would go in GraphQL and manually, like 40 people in a workshop, I would go in GraphQL and just enable their accounts one by one because I was lazy to build UI. I was like, wow, if this if this is going this way, one day we won't have to write any UI for our backends and stuff. Like we can do all the admin management like just from a tool like this. That's why I was like super impressed by that. So then with Prisma, actually, with the first version of Prisma, you kind of have that, the managed service. So you wanted to keep like in the spirit of GraphQL, let's also have like a studio where you can edit your data and you can do most of the things. But we kind of lost some of the abilities. We had to like host our own. Like I'm mostly going through all of this because some people are still confused about the evolution and what happened. So sorry if I'm going through things where you're like, yeah, dude, I know, I was working on it. But there are a bunch of people in the chat.
No, I think that's great. I think it's
yeah,
like it's perfectly fine. Actually, I think you might want to pull up a blog post that we wrote about Prisma and GraphQL and about our entire history, because there we have a couple of technical illustrations that show like what the evolution of the toolchain was.
Is it this Prisma and GraphQL fit together? Yeah,
exactly. And if you scroll down a little bit, then you come to the first kind of diagram where we see
this was the first sign.
Exactly. So the evolution of the entire company and the product, right? We started out with GraphQL, which was what you just described. Then we had the first evolution of Prisma 1 in January 2018 with a JavaScript layer that was called Prisma Bindings. Half a year later, we launched the Prisma client, and now it's Prisma 2.0. So if you scroll down, you'll see the architecture of GraphQL. And it was exactly this, what you just described, right? You had your front-end application. That's what you were implementing yourself, whether it's a mobile app or a React app, Vue app. And then you have this GraphQL, the GraphQL backend as a service, where you can create your data model in a UI. And what GraphQL gives you is a full like CRUD API for that data model, and you don't have to take care of the application server, of the database, of implementing any resolvers. All of that was generated for you. Plus, you got that data browser where you could go in and just edit the data.
It's sort of like an admin panel, at least for my apps. I was like, cool, I don't have to make an admin panel. I can just use this thing. However, you quickly hit the limitations of GraphQL. Anytime you needed to do something more advanced, like when you allowed functions to be deployed, like that was nice to extend the functionality, but it was super clunky compared to what you have now with hosting Nexus or whatever it is. So then I started realizing, okay, this is cool to start an app with. You feel like a wizard doing everything through a UI. And as soon as you try to extend it or customize it, you hit a roadblock. There's like no solution. I guess that's what drove you to actually moving to the next step, right?
Exactly. And you see that actually in these, like in the bullet points there, where, which were in the background, that like the people who used GraphQL, they really loved it because it was very easy to use. And it was also in the time where like GraphQL just became popular. So a lot of people just wanted to learn GraphQL. So it was also really nice for them to just like spin up a new GraphQL API without a lot of overhead and being able to learn GraphQL from a front end. And what we've seen, though, is exactly what you described, that, okay, a lot of people were like, hey, this is awesome. I'm going to build a prototype with it. And once that prototype was done and they understood kind of how the main mechanics work, they were like, okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to build my own thing now and not use GraphQL anymore. And like, while there were like a few people that were kind of building their critical applications on it, the vast majority of people kind of use it as like a prototype building tool. So we thought, okay, like what are the problems that we're actually trying to solve and how can we solve those differently?
Yeah, it makes sense. Let me see in the chat. People are asking, is Prisma introspect stable yet? We're going to go into all of that. Depends on your need, if you need API for multiple things and so on. Yeah, so same for my projects. I had like my main project. It was React Academy. It was like the main business that I lived from. It was there, but I quickly... okay, I feel that Nikolas' mic is a bit low volume. Nikolas, maybe on Zoom you're using your AirPods instead of using your mic. Can you check Zoom?
Yeah, I checked. I'm using the microphone, but I'm just worried that I'm too far away. So I'll try to speak like this now.
I like how the green screen is taking a part of your mouth and it looks like half of your face is gone. We should have planned for that.
It's a little bit unfortunate. Yeah, I don't know how, like I'm not a professional Twitch streamer yet. I just have a microphone that I can use, but I think I have to speak into it more. And I guess that's better.
Yeah.
Whoever said that.
Hopefully. I can stop the music and we can bump Nikolas a little bit if you want to. Like I can increase the gain from here. Just give me a sec.
Yeah. Ooh, I love the questions already. How does Prisma compare to Apollo? So we'll definitely talk about that. So is the audio quality better now? Koen the Dutch?
I bumped you 2 dB, so that should be a little bit better for Nikolas. I bumped his audio better. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Is it fine now, Nimster? Everyone else? It's fine now? All the balance? Perfect now. Cool. Get it? Cool. Graph cool? Okay. So we perfectly understand why you took the first step, right? Moving from GraphQL to the Prisma bindings. But it seems like right now where you at, that's what I said after the stream. And a lot of people were asking me and DMing me, hey man, what do you think? I never stopped recommending it. I'm like, if you start using Prisma now, there hasn't been a better period to start using it. Because it seems now like this is it. You finally found it. It's the final product. It's just frustrating. Kitze is a bit louder, but sound of Nikolas is clear. Cool. It's just frustrating for the people who are there from the start. It's not frustrating for people who are joining now, because now it seems like you have a clear mission, you have a clear explanation. It's like, okay, this is what we want to solve. It's just like when I see people in the Prisma Slack asking questions, like still asking questions about GraphQL functions or something about Prisma 1, I'm like, oh, if you only knew. If you only knew. But what steps are, like, you probably learned that was you achieved let's say the mission and your, let's say, the final approach goal, whatever you have. But have you learned anything from the entire thing that you're actually pissing off a lot of people who are like, some people might be like, hey, I'm never coming back. This is like super unstable. I'm not going to trust these guys. Are you changing anything in your, I don't know, company, organization, planning, whatever, to just address this issue?
So I think that in general, we have changed quite a bit about how we operate as a company. I mean, it's also part of being a startup and like being a growing startup. Yeah. We've grown the team to up to, I think, like 35 people now. And that also comes with the introduction of proper processes. So we now have a specs repository. So you can look that up on GitHub. It's /prisma/specs, where we have like technical specifications for everything that we want to build. So it's kind of like an RFC process where people can also create issues, they can join the discussion and see kind of what our plans are for certain features. So like that's a big part, I think, that serves in terms of transparency, that helps a lot of people understand what our plans are. The entire engineering process is taking place on GitHub by now. So we are very rigid about like GitHub issues being triaged, making them actionable for the engineering team, like being sure to look at all the issues in our weekly or like bi-weekly sprint planning meetings and to prioritize them accordingly. So it's always the case that if you actually want us to work on something, the best way is to just go and create an issue on GitHub. Yeah. And once you have that GitHub issue, you can drop in on our Slack or start a conversation around it. But without a GitHub issue and just a Slack message, it's often very difficult for us to react to things because all our process is based on GitHub. So that's always the best case to just go on GitHub, create your issue, ask your question, whatever.
Absolutely. Like I feel like right now, a thing that I'm trying to change in the CZ Slack, like Slack is becoming, especially right now with everyone going remote and so on, even like you have zillions of people in the Slack. We have like 4 people in our Slack in CZ. And still, I feel that me and the other people are using and abusing Slack in a very wrong way, where you just dump a message and you're like, hey, this is frustrating. This needs to be done, but you never put it as part of some process. Like somebody needs to pick it up. Like Slack for me is becoming like a real life office. And my life goal is to never like have a real life office with people. Just because I feel that people are abusing that people are around them to fuck up the process of the company. And that's why I think a lot of companies are struggling right now with the Corona thing, because they were used to just yelling at each other, hey, this is not fixed, the design is ready and so on, but that's not a right process. So I like what you're saying. It's a bit frustrating. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a bit frustrating. And I get that both as a user and as an owner of our app where people are reporting issues. Like when I report something on Slack, let's say about Prisma or GraphQL or whatever it is, I just want that to be the end of the story, you know? I'm like, hey, I bothered to tell you about this issue. So now it's your job to put it wherever you put it in your issues and stuff. And usually I see the replies are, hey, we would appreciate it if you create an issue. It's not only your replies. Usually I do the same thing for CZ. Like someone's going to be just casually saying, on Twitter, hey Kitze, it would be nice if we can see this and that for CZ. And I'm like, go to our public Trello board, which is our roadmap. People can vote on it and we can put it in our process. So I get that's frustrating, but I also think like, should it be my job to actually put this to Trello and just be thankful that the customer and the user, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I like that GitHub is your process, but you still have to have maybe a person that takes care of this, or I don't know.
So we recently hired somebody who is just now taking care of all the user requests and who is basically doing exactly what you said, to ask people to create GitHub issues.
Yeah.
When they run into errors or if they have feature requests or anything like that.
Yeah.
In general, I think, and the way how I perceive it is that people are actually very open about that, and that it's not something that they feel actually like a chore or anything. Like on the contrary, actually, I think that creating a GitHub issue for somebody is actually a great way to explain their problem and also keep track of what is happening to that problem, right? Because they get email notifications when there are new comments, when it gets closed, when somebody might post a workaround in there, you can have a conversation around the issue and how to potentially resolve it. So the way how I actually see it is that a lot of people don't see it as a chore or as a like negative thing, but they actually appreciate that we have this kind of open process and they have a way to follow up and talk about their questions and issues, right? So like, I don't necessarily have the exact same experience, but I think it also depends a little bit on where. So I think on Twitter, it's different than on Slack. If people are on Slack, they are already a little bit more invested into the things that we do. And on Twitter, kind of everybody just shouts out their random wishes for what they would like us to build. And that's, of course, like a little bit less immersed or involved into the things that we do, and they might not go on GitHub. But on Slack, that actually works quite well.
Yeah. I love doing it because it makes you lazy. I hate when people do it. Like when someone posts about something, about CZ, they're like, hey, this is broken, or hey, we want this. I'm like, couldn't you send a DM or an email? And then when I have a problem with any service, Prisma or whatever it is, the easiest thing in the world is just go to Twitter and add them. Hey, McDonald's, your salad sucks, whatever. And it's like, you're not gonna fix it. But I still think there should be like your team is handling it quite well and quite like chill and approachable and so on. GXRay97, I'm putting all of your questions right here on Notion. We're gonna prioritize questions. We're gonna start with questions in a second. So I'm glad that you're actually thinking about this and fixing the process. You mentioned that you had a discussion in your team. Like, I don't know if we should bring that up on stream. Like after my rant, because we had the talk during our dinner. Oh, by the way, I have to tell people this. I have to tell people that this exists. We went to a vegan Korean restaurant. Was it like that? Vegan Korean, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Previously, I think I've tried Korean food a couple of times, but vegan Korean, it was super fine. It was great. But there was something on the menu that there was vegan wine. And I don't know if it was you or Johannes who explained what is vegan wine. And I'm like, do you remember about the vegan wine situation? Because I'm telling that to everyone I know.
There must have been Johannes, though. I don't necessarily recall it, to be honest.
Vegan wine, it's a wine, then the grapes were squished through something that wasn't touched by animals or something. It was something like that. I'm like, okay, too far, out of here.
Yeah, I recall Johannes talking about this, but I also don't recall the details, to be honest.
Yeah. I completely missed my point there. I wanted to say something about something that we were discussing there, about the approach. Oh, yeah. Back then, you told me that in the company, like you were mentioning me as the type of user who would use your services or something like you mentioned something like that. Maybe you can explain it better. I don't know.
Sure. You're kind of like the reference user for like the people that we want to satisfy with our tools. So like when we have internal decisions, we often think about, okay, what would Kitze say about this? Would he be happy or would he be not happy? And like that's one way how we kind of try to capture that kind of audience. And I think to like make it a little bit more clear what that actually means, I think like you're the kind of person that wants to build applications. You don't want to spend a lot of time to wrangle with your setups or with technology. You just want to go out there and take these ideas that you have in your head and implement them and make them available to your users. You don't want to spend time with technology, basically. For you, technology is just a means to an end.
Exactly.
And that's why like GraphQL was so nice for you, because all you had to do was you define your data model and you get a database and a GraphQL API, and you can start working on the actual front-end application that your users are going to see, right? And
once you got a little bit of taste of that magic, trust me, every step, it feels like I understand you completely, but everything that I'm like, fuck, this is more work for me. Like once you taste that something is magical, it's like going back to writing assembly. So after you were writing GraphQL for a while, it's just like, fuck, now I have to do a lot more work. But I get it, like you're going in a circle. Let's try to make it more modular. And then maybe one day we or someone else on top of Prisma is going to build something like GraphQL, but it's going to be 10 times more extensible, and it's going to be like, that's the cycle, right? That's the idea.
That's exactly the point. I think that we will come back to that experience where you kind of define your models once, and however you define them, whether that's in the Prisma schema or whether we'll build a UI layer that allows you to do this kind of data modeling in a UI as well. I think like these are the kinds of questions that we're currently thinking about, but it's indeed absolutely possible that in the future, like somebody's going to come and say, hey, I'm going to build my own GraphQL backend as a service that behaved like GraphQL, but I'm going to build it on a modern stack that helps me with most of these tasks already, and that's going to be Prisma and Nexus then in that case. And the kind of compensation that we have at the moment for people like you that look for that experience of defining their models once and having the database and the GraphQL API fall out of that is basically what we are working on with Nexus and the integration to Prisma at the moment. And it's still not where it should be, and we're like actively working on it, and it probably takes a couple of months until that entire experience is like super smooth, but we are making a lot of progress. And that initial beta release of Prisma 2 a couple of weeks ago was the first major step. And actually Nexus also is in a very, very good state already to be tried out and to be explored. So I can recommend to everybody who's seeing this and who wants to take or like who's not quite sure about what the state of these tools is, like they can go in and try them today. And I'm pretty sure that they will get already a quite long way with the state the tools are in today.
I mean, the Nexus docs, last time I checked them, are still in progress and they're changing rapidly. So it was a bit frustrating, like when you upgrade versions. That's how my issue happened on stream, basically. I upgraded Nexus versions that had a different version of Prisma. My server wasn't running. The error message wasn't telling me what's wrong. And then I go in the Prisma releases. I'm like, oh, now I have to add more things. So my data... But like the overall end goal, I have been like, if you know on Twitter what's going on more or less. I don't know if you watched any of the streams. But I had a stream with AWS Amplify. I had a stream with Fauna. I had a stream with a couple other people. And like in my mind, still the way of building things with Nexus and Prisma, here it's where it's at for me. Like it's the perfect level of you get a bunch of automated shit, and then you feel free to take any chunk of it and just customize the shit out of it. So that to me, that's like the real power. And I think like any person, as you said, I'm the type of user who wants to build stuff. I don't have a preference of, oh, let's go back and write raw SQL for the next 30 years, because that's what we were doing for the past 30 years. And I think like, if I would put my trust in you, so you generate everything for me, and you improve the way you do things, I can just think about my apps and my business logic, and I can just bump Prisma, and then, oh, they just made queries faster. That's how I see the future. And I see there's another camp that would be like, we would never use Prisma, we would never even use an ORM. We just want to do things with raw SQL forever, which we're going to discuss Blitz. We're going to discuss Redwood. We're going to discuss the GraphQL support in a second. Did you see this tweet from DHH?
Yes, I did.
What do you think about, for people who haven't seen the tweet, he was like, is this really what modern web apps and development looks like to people these days? We're living through the dark ages. Like, I couldn't agree more with him. Like, if you're starting a new app in 2020 and you're starting with this kind of boilerplate and you still have the opinion, bro, REST is still the best, like, I don't want to use GraphQL and I'm just going to use queries, you are in the dark ages. Because, like, once you get used to the Nexus and Prisma experience, like, why would you do any of this shit? This would be, like, one line. And a bunch of people are pissed, even though most backends nowadays look like this. So what are your thoughts on the tweet?
So like that's the kind of code that is the same as 4 or 5 years ago, right? It's kind of the same code that you would have written with pretty much the first version of Express as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it shows very well the evolution that we went through since that time. And indeed, like if we're talking about modern ways to do web development and API development, I think the first important thing here is to say that GraphQL is kind of becoming the new standard for that. And there are a lot of benefits to GraphQL. I don't know if we have to kind of iterate them now, but for me, the biggest one is the fact that you get a schema for your API.
Yeah.
Like that was always my personal favorite property of GraphQL in general, that as a front-end developer, you don't have to wonder anymore what kind of data you're getting back from the backend, but in fact, you just like can decide it yourself by formulating the correct query, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the magical part about GraphQL. And then it has a couple of other benefits, like you can fetch related data in a single query. You don't have that like N+1 problem for HTTP requests that you send off. So I think it comes with a couple of other benefits, but to me, the schema there is really the main point that makes the API development a lot better. And you could argue that you get to the same point when you're using Swagger or OpenAPI. You can get to a similar experience with REST. And I think that's fair. And I think if you have such a setup where you're using Swagger or OpenAPI to define the API, to define the operation of your API, I think that's great. But you don't have anything in place that makes sure that this Swagger schema and your actual API are in sync, right? So
it's
contract could tell you one thing, but the actual implementation is decoupled from that.
Yep.
So the cool thing about GraphQL is that it couples your schema to the implementation, and you know what you're going to get. Like there's no way around that.
Absolutely. Like to me, anything else would feel like going back. I don't even want to bring that as a point of discussion here about the evolution of REST. I get that people cannot migrate. I get that people cannot move from REST to GraphQL overnight, but there are ways to keep your REST API and slowly build a GraphQL API on top of it. However, there are still people who think that that's not a step forward. It's blowing my mind. So that's just like the CSS versus CSS in JS discussion. I don't even want to have it here. Few things to address in the chat. Kitze is having breathing, spider IO. It's insanely hot in this room, and I have a like bright heavy light right now in my face. I'm sweating. So yeah. Someone else said about the security point. We're gonna discuss that. Is it possible for me and him to switch positions? Not really, because it's gonna like I'm gonna be on top of his username and he's gonna be on mine. I would have to figure out like a layout when people are sitting like opposite, but it doesn't matter for now. We can keep on the discussion. Grebonato is asking, is it fair to compare Prisma to a type ORM? I think that we can start with the questions. Is it fair to compare Prisma to type ORM? Let's go with that one. I'm curious.
That is a total fair comparison. I mean, it's kind of the same category of tools, right? If you think of Prisma in the way that I just described it, it's an open source way to access your database, and TypeORM pretty much is the same, right? It also gives you a programmatic API to talk to your database. But there are a couple of really important things that I think distinguishes Prisma from the way how TypeORM operates. So, like, first of all, Prisma is not an ORM, an object relational mapper. And there is a lot of conversation about the topic of ORMs in general and what exactly it means. The way how we kind of understand and define it is that when you're using an ORM, the classic way of kind of modeling your data is to model your data as classes, right? Yeah. You have a class, and that class kind of is supposed to represent a table in your database. And what you can do then like, for example, if you use the active record style of ORMs, which is also, I think, like very close to what SQLize is doing, where you have these like model instances. So you instantiate your model classes, and then you can call couple of methods on them, like create or find or save or like whatever these like methods are, and you don't really know what's going on under the hood, and it's just a big model instance that can do a lot of things, and that's not the way how Prisma actually works. With Prisma, we take an entirely different approach, where we are generating a query API for your database schema. So we are able to introspect your database, and based on the structures that we read from your database, like based on these tables, we can generate a dedicated API that you can use to formulate your queries. So the way how we actually see Prisma as more of like a query builder, though it's not kind of like a SQL query builder in the same way that Knex, for example, would be. You don't operate on direct SQL queries. You don't perform explicit joins. You don't perform explicit selects. We provide a nicer API that feels a lot more familiar and natural.
It's similar to GraphQL in a way, because you can pick and fetch and connect things. You can be like, give me all the users, but filter them and also connect them to a project. So to me, like the Prisma client right now, as you said, like I've worked with a couple of ORMs before and they're super clunky. And I get why people are pissed off about ORMs. But this is nothing like it. Like when you use it, and especially now when the typing is like super stellar and you get types for everything, you cannot screw up. It's not fair to compare it. Like it's way better than an ORM. But I don't know how you can market that in a way that's clear to people, you know. It's a bit tricky.
And we have been struggling a lot with that, actually, about the fact, like, what do we call Prisma? Like Prisma client, like what is it? Is it an ORM? Is it a query builder? Is it a database client? Is it a data mapper? Like there are 1,000 words to potentially describe it, and for now we've settled on query builder, but we actually have a discussion in an issue in the Prisma 2 or in the Prisma repo about that, where people can share their opinions on what they think Prisma is, and maybe we change the main notion there again in the future. Whatever kind of resonates with people, right? Yeah. And at the moment we see that query builder kind of resonates with people, but a common misconception still is that when people hear query builder, they immediately think about SQL and tools like Knex, where you just have a programmatic API to build up a SQL query that you can send to the database. And that's not what Prisma is, because we abstract away from SQL as well, right? We really give you an API that feels very familiar and that only lets you kind of think about your data and not about the SQL queries that you need in order to get that data, right? Because as an application developer, you just want data from a database and you don't care how it's being retrieved. You just need it so that you can build something in your application.
Yeah. I get you, but it's like the most frustrating part about building CZ right now is to just tell, like I just changed the tagline, but it's very hard to tell people. Even if you write the most like descriptive tagline in the world and you describe Prisma with one sentence, it's so frustrating as a maker of something. Like I get the struggles. It's like how right now we describe CZ as the browser for developers, but I still think that people don't get it completely why. And it's gonna drive me like insane to properly market it. Like that's a good idea that you have the Slack channel where people can actually say what they think it is. I'm not in there. Maybe I should be in that Slack channel if you can point me to it. But I like that you have that.
It's actually a GitHub issue. It's a GitHub issue.
A GitHub issue.
I can quickly actually look it up.
You can look it up. Link it to me privately on Slack, and I'm gonna put it here. So yeah, let's see the questions. Business model. We're gonna talk about the business model. If Prisma doesn't build SQL, how does it talk to the database? That's an interesting question from Adnan. You can quickly address that before we move on. So you can just quickly address if it doesn't build SQL, how does it talk to the database?
So there is a SQL layer in Prisma. So the way how Prisma works is that there is a query engine that's running as a side process next to Prisma Client, and that is taking in requests from Prisma Client and generating the SQL queries, which are then sent to the database and returned to the upper layer. If you want to open up maybe the documentation, I think we have illustrations for that, like how that works. If we can provide a quick overview there.
But where is that? Can you point me where?
Yeah, sure. And if you expand Prisma Client on the left.
Yep.
Sidebar. And now there is a section called Query Engine.
Query Engine. Okay.
Right. And if you scroll down a little bit.
Oh, so I personally have never seen this. If you wanna dive deep into that, I'm gonna put it in the chat right here. If you wanna dive deep into that, we can move on from this. Like it's not that. It's not the main point of discussion. People are asking in the chat, and actually I had that. And anytime I think about it, I'm still laughing. What happened on my stream when I saw that you actually renamed Prisma 2 to Prisma, and then I was reading the docs, and I still think that I cannot finish that segment saying it out loud without laughing my ass off, because it's like you change it to from Prisma 2 to just Prisma, right? And then in the docs, there was a sentence. I'm not sure if I can find where it is. Let me just try to find the sentence that I'm talking about, because it's still super funny. And here it still says introducing Prisma 2.0, which could be confusing for people. But there was a segment that says, if you're migrating from Prisma 1 or 2, something like that.
I know what you're talking about.
But I just want to show it to people who haven't watched. You know where?
Yeah. It's on the relations page on top. So if you expand Prisma schema on the left in the side nav.
Prisma schema.
Side nav, you have Prisma schema.
Relations.
Yes, there. And then scroll down.
Yeah. If you're upgrading from Prisma 2.0 preview version. Yeah, okay. I think maybe now it was changed. It's changed, but it said like, imagine you're taking a vacation, you're coming back, you were using Prisma, you're like, finally, these guys have figured it out, they're taking the right direction, and you are on Prisma 2, right? You come back and you read, if you're upgrading from Prisma 2, and you'll be like, upgrading to what? To Prisma 1. Oh, it's not Prisma 1, it's Prisma. So it could be super, I personally think, I have a lot of opinions, not all of them are right, but I don't know if that was what made you do that, because that made things even more confusing. Like Prisma 2, I was fine with the naming. It's going, 2. Now it's just Prisma, but people who are coming back to old docs and issues, it might be like a layer that they're not going to get past. They're going to be like, oh, this is too confusing. I just can't. Have you thought, like, what is the migration path there to purge all the old docs issues, whatever? Are you automating it somehow, or what are you doing?
So the way how we thought about it is that indeed we had Prisma 1 as kind of the main tool for people to get started with Prisma for the longest time. And now that we introduced the first somewhat stable version of Prisma 2 with the beta, we thought that this is going to be the default way for people to get started. And newcomers to Prisma, they don't care that this is now Prisma 2. So we want them to think about Prisma 2 as the default version of Prisma today, and that's why we decided to rename Prisma 2 to just Prisma, and whenever we need to refer back to Prisma 1, we'll explicitly call it Prisma 1. And that's exactly what happened with all our resources. And in fact, we have, if you go, for example, to the beta blog post, we have a table that explains you what is changing, how do the repositories change, how does the CLI command change. It's just the latest blog post there, indeed.
This one?
And if you scroll down a little bit, scroll down, there is going to be a table that tells you, there you go.
This one. Yeah, still, just looking at it, it's like, fuck, which npm packages do I install, which do I reinstall, and so on. I get it. For the new users, it's going to be clear. Yeah. Hey, it's Prisma. But for the old users, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Let me look at it. Prisma 2.0 old command. Yeah.
So that's absolutely right. And we, in fact, at the moment, we don't necessarily recommend for people to upgrade just yet, because we are currently in the process of working on extra tools that help you with the upgrade process, because there are a couple of intricacies with the Prisma 1 schema and the way how it mapped to your database that are not straightforward to resolve if you want to upgrade to Prisma 2. So what we're doing at the moment, we're building a CLI that is actually going to walk you through the upgrade process, like an interactive CLI that tells you, hey, now run these commands or execute this SQL statement against your database to be compatible with Prisma 2. So things like that is what we have in the making at the moment, and that's what we're going to publish along with the actual general availability GA release in a couple of weeks.
Nice. I personally love CLIs. I cannot get enough of them. I think we need more CLIs in the world. I'm looking forward to using. People in the stream know what's going on. I'm not sure if you're
joking there. Yeah.
No, I am joking. One more CLI is gonna be the end of me. But I actually, last time I used the Nexus experience, I like that it's way more helpful than before. And I think that's the naming, all of that, it can be resolved. The main point is, at the end of the day, when I run your tooling, Prisma and Nexus last time didn't point out to what was my mistake. If it wasn't for your people in the stream, I would never figure out the bug that I had to add new things to the schema. So the tooling, the CLI, whatever I was running wasn't telling me, hey, you're missing that. It was just being like, blah, 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 not found. And if you get that to a level, like you showed me when we were out to dinner, somebody pulled out their laptop and they were showing me things with Nexus. And I was like, if it helps you that much to pinpoint, hey, you have an error in that layer or in the Nexus layer, in the Prisma layer, I don't have a problem with the CLI. I'm just joking around. But yeah, I see that you're making a lot of progress on it. What do we have in the chat? For me, Prisma Introspect is the most attractive feature, but it wasn't stable last time I used. I didn't use Prisma Introspect because I was used to just writing a schema file or whatever it's called right now. The Prisma what do you call it right now? The Prisma config or the Prisma
it's
data?
It's called the Prisma schema file.
The Prisma schema file, and that generates a database from me. So I never started from a database to use Prisma Introspect. But people are saying in the chat that it wasn't stable. You said that right now that's your focus, right?
Indeed. So there are effectively two ways how you can use Prisma. So one way is the way how you want to use it, where you write your Prisma schema, and you define your models there, and then you map those models to your database. So you don't have to write any SQL statements to change your database schema, but you do everything through Prisma, basically. You define your Prisma schema and map it to your database. That's the workflow that you want, and that
this is what it looks
available.
Like. If for people who haven't seen it. And it's, if you ask me, a person who doesn't want to write 130 SQL statements, I love this as a definition of my database. The part that I don't like, even with Prisma 1, I had never had a problem with this. Even with the formatting, whatever. You have VS Code extensions, you have your new Prisma format command. So this could be formatted in any editor with a watcher, whatever. So this is maybe weird for people who, I don't know, were already having a database. So for people who have a database and they see this, they're like, this is not valuable for me. I don't want to introspect my database. But for people who want to start a project or they want to start in a way, this is freaking an amazing way to start. Cohen is saying, I like going from the Prisma schema to generating. It's an amazing feature. It's one of the best-selling features, I think.
So I totally agree with you here. And we are currently focusing, or we are already starting to focus again on Prisma Migrate. But a couple of months ago, actually, I think around October or November, we kind of had to make a call, because at that point, we already had a pretty stable version of Prisma Client that people could use. But the question always was, okay, how do they use it? How do they generate it in the first place? And the problem was always kind of Prisma Migrate and the state that we were in with that, because we weren't quite sure, are we on the right track there? And is that really kind of how Prisma Migrate should look like? So at that point, we kind of made a call to say, we're not going to focus on Prisma Migrate for the time being, but instead we'll focus on improving the introspection capabilities of Prisma, so that you can generate the Prisma schema from your database schema, and then you generate Prisma Client from the Prisma schema. And that was the workflow that we picked back then, and that we invested a lot of time in. So now introspection actually is very, very robust and should work with almost all databases. Mm-hmm. We have pretty much like all features supported. And even if your database uses a feature that is not yet supported by Prisma, then the introspection still is not going to fail, but it'll just be like committed out in the resulting Prisma schema, basically. And I think it's actually a good idea in hindsight that we took that approach, because being forced to think about all these different ways how a database schema can be designed and being able to cope with that through introspection, I think has informed a lot of the kind of things that we now want to do with Migrate. So we learned a lot through that process of building out the introspection that we can now apply for Migrate. But this is the perfect example of a decision where we said internally, and we were thinking about this, and we were like, okay, this is a decision that is not going to make Kitze happy, but well, we have to do this to become more to become more robust, to build a stable core, and then we can build up on top of that again. But it was really this idea of taking one step back and then taking two steps forward, basically, and that's the state that we are in at the moment. And we are now shifting slowly our attention towards Prisma Migrate again.
Yep. People say in the chat that introspection is pretty stable now, so that's great. The thing, like, when you're using me as an example, a lot of my side projects have turned into like a more serious business, and I see the rest of them actually turning into another and another business. And I just want to grow, you know, the people that I hire and so on. But I've been, since we have that conversation in the restaurant, I mentioned I cannot move my projects forward right now. I just literally froze everything on my backend. I was like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to migrate to Nexus right now. It doesn't make sense to migrate Nexus when it was called Santa. Yoga 2 didn't make a lot of sense. So I was like, okay, I'm going to work with whatever I have. I'm going to freeze all of my backend things for now until they figure out what they're going to do. But even with the state of things, as you're saying it is right now, right? I decided for the new React Academy Labs or whatever tool I was building, I decided, okay, now it might be the right time. I'm going to pick it up. And along the way, it's going to be stable and it's going to be just sparkles and happiness and rainbows for everyone. Second beta release completely breaks everything for me. And it's like, if I would go back, I wouldn't even start working with the beta until you actually have the stable release. And then I would just evaluate it, look at it and be like, okay, this is how things are right now. Do I want to write a backend with the way things are right now? So I was always like following along. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to write more code. Fuck it. I'm going to write more. Fuck it. But then I realized that I'm putting like all of my eggs in one basket. And it's like, whatever you decide drives the backend for 5 of the apps that I have. That are, some of them are my main business. Like I don't freelance. I don't do anything anymore. It's just like, they are my business. So whatever happens to them, it's like in your hands. And that's very, you know, you're not very...
That's scary.
It is scary. It is scary because like one day you may decide, hey, we're going to shift this. I'm like, fuck. Like, just like it happened with Now. Like the Now migration, actually they did it and they warned everyone 2 years ago. I just didn't listen. I was like, one day migration to Now 2.0 is going to be easy. Now, when they were like sunsetting Now 2.0, you cannot deploy anymore. I'm like, wait, all of my backends are hosted there. I cannot make a new deploy? They're like, nope. Let us help you migrate to Now 2.0. I'm like, okay. And they're like, you just have to use serverless. And I'm like, but the Nexus version that I'm stuck with, the Prisma, the whatever, nothing works with serverless out of the box. So right now I'm in a, you know, in a very shitty position because I was relying on so many services. And I would say that I get people who are saying like, I don't want any abstractions. I don't want any services. I'm going to build stuff from scratch. Because you're going to write more, you're going to do more, but at the end of the day, no one can, you know, just pull the plug on a service and just fuck you over, which is like very scary position to be in. So people mentioned in the chat, and maybe we can address that. What about the sunsetting of GraphQL? I mean, you gave people enough time. Is there a migration path? Is it automated? How is it? I have no idea. I don't have anything on GraphQL anymore. I migrated on time, but...
So the idea for the GraphQL migration basically is that you can upgrade to Prisma 2, and the envisioned migration path for that is that you get a SQL dump of your GraphQL database. So you have all the data that you have in GraphQL, and you now have it as a SQL file that you can import into your own database. Mm-hmm. And then you can introspect that with Prisma 2. And then you have
with Prisma, not with Prisma 2, just to correct
you. Yeah, exactly. With Prisma. and the Prisma schema. And then you can start building your application there. But an important note about that is, and we talked a lot about this internally as well, is that Prisma 2 is very, very different from what GraphQL was. So with GraphQL, this was the entire backend as a service, right? A hosted database, a hosted application server, a CRUD GraphQL API,
too many things
GUI for modeling your data, real-time subscriptions, like a lot of things in one package. Prisma 2, in the state that it is today, is basically just a database client that you get. So you have to really think about that yourself. Is Prisma 2 the right tool for you, or
if you're migrating from
or
GraphQL.
Actually might a different tool be better? And we want to help you with whatever your decision is. If you want to upgrade to Prisma 2, we would of course welcome that, and we want to help you with that, and we will put out like migration guides for that. But if you want to migrate to a different provider, that's totally fine with us, because GraphQL is just not the same as Prisma 2. So we totally understand that decision, and we want to help you with that process as well. So if you have these kinds of questions, feel free to reach out to me. We're currently talking to a lot of GraphQL users and trying to evaluate their use cases and what their preferred migration paths look like, and then try to support them with the right content.
I get it. Like, you cannot tell people, hey, move from GraphQL to Prisma, because for most of them, it won't make sense. Like if you picked GraphQL for the reasons that you picked it for, you don't want to go to Prisma and migrate everything and build your own tools. But, however, when you start using something else, you might quickly realize, oh, this is why they made, that migration path, and this is what they got where they are right now. So I completely understand that. Something similar, hopefully you're not going to be mad that I'm plugging it in. I'm not even using it at the moment. It's Graph CMS. But they also shifted their path to just be more like a CMS that also serves a GraphQL API, which is fine, but I'm gonna do a separate stream on this. I was using Graph CMS for React Academy, not for mutations, just as a CMS, just as something that I can dump a bunch of data and it gives me a GraphQL API. I wouldn't write an app with it. I don't care about the mutations. I've seen the flexibility of Nexus and Prisma, so now going to something like GraphQL and Graph CMS would be super limiting for me. So I wouldn't go back. And I decided right now, we were supposed, because they also sunsetted, everyone is sunsetting shit nowadays. They were like, sunsetting Graph CMS 1.0. Do you want us to help you migrate to Graph CMS 2 on stream? And I researched CMSs, and it turns out every CMS nowadays has a GraphQL endpoint. So I'm like, if every CMS has a GraphQL endpoint, what is the value of Graph CMS? It's just another CMS in the game. And I've actually found a couple of other options that might be better as a CMS, and all of them serve a GraphQL endpoint. So a bunch of these services popped up. People were asking in the chat, what can I use? Like if you just go to any CMS, I don't know, Graph CMS, Sanity, Prismic, whatever. I'm going to do a stream on this. You can pick whatever, and you're going to get more or less the same experience that you get from GraphQL. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think GraphQL was just like a CMS-y thing that you just define a schema for.
Right. I mean, the first versions, I think, of GraphQL and Graph CMS weren't too different, but I think the focus was very different because with GraphQL, you still had a tool that was primarily targeted at developers. And I think with a CMS, you typically have that use case where you also target content creators, right? So the use case is a little bit different. And like personally, I think like I'm a big fan of Graph CMS actually, and we're also friends with their team. In fact, their team in Berlin is now in our old Prisma office. So like they moved into our old office once we moved out there. And
so maybe it's just something with the office. Whoever inhabits that office, people are like, yo, what if we sunset the old service and just release a couple of That's interesting. I didn't know that you were friends with them, and that's weird. I mean, that's not weird for me.
No, so like they're super nice, and they recently launched this new version of Graph CMS. And I'm looked at it, played around with it a little bit, and it looks really nice. Very nice UI, very slick. So
it just really depends what are you gonna build with it. There are people who are gonna pick it for building an app using the mutations and stuff, and they're gonna hit the same wall that you would hit with GraphQL or whatever. So people are like, perfect segue. People are mentioning Hasura and all these other things in the chat, which I want to discuss. I had a stream with them. If you want to watch the stream, you can go to my YouTube and watch the previous streams just to see my opinion and stuff. I like everything that I've seen. At the end of the day, what I don't like, and like to me, like Nexus is perfect for that, is anytime that I like that in Hasura or AWS AppSync, whatever, you're gonna do a bunch of things through UI. Anytime you need to customize something that they generate for you, you have to have a serverless Lambda function. Like if you want to put something in between your client and your Hasura database, you would have to put something in between, host it as a serverless function somewhere. And then like looking at a real life app that I have with Nexus right now, it has like 20 custom mutations, 20 custom queries, perfectly typed with Prisma, like there cannot be a bug there or whatever. If I would need to rewrite that same thing with Hasura or Amplify or Lambdas or whatever, it seems like a giant pain in the ass just to customize it. So I think they get you in the first place like, okay, everything is hosted, you're gonna do a bunch of things to UI until you need to customize it, and you're like, I'm either gonna use Velocity or whatever AWS's thing it's called for custom resolvers, or I have to host a serverless function for registering a user. And then you're losing everything that you get from Prisma, like the types and so on. Like you would still have to write a GraphQL query or a GraphQL mutation as a string. So from what I've seen with the stream with Hasura, when you write a custom resolver in it, you would have to call your Hasura backend with just a string. So compare that GraphQL string, like GraphQL mutation, with prisma.user.create. It's not comparable. Like the security that you're gonna get, that everything is typed here. So I don't know, people might have a different experience. I'm still just observing these things, and I'm trying to get like a generic overview of the entire ecosystem and what tool to pick and what tool, like different tools have different, as we said, GraphCMS can be used for one thing, Prisma for another thing. A lot of people might pick Hazura for real-time stuff because it supports it out of the box. So anyway, I'm rambling for too long. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe just plug in your thoughts on, I don't know, subscriptions, how you plan to tackle that. Maybe Nexus gonna tackle that. Just whatever you think.
Yeah, sure. So I think like a couple of points were interesting that you were mentioning, especially the part about when you added or when you needed to add business logic to these GraphQL as a service providers, right? I want to call these, I like the right name, but it's effectively that, right? They give you a CRUD GraphQL API for a database. And that was what GraphQL was. To an extent, it was what Prisma 1 was. And that's basically what tools like PostgreSQL, Hasura, or like AWS AppSync do, right? And the problem with that is kind of the flexibility when you have to drop out of that CRUD style data access, when you have to actually perform business logic. You can include your own business logic with all of these tools. That's perfectly possible. You can write custom resolvers, you can plug in like serverless functions as hooks. That is all possible, but it's not the same kind of developer experience. And that's a like realization we had with GraphQL, where we offered the same functionality, right? We also offered you to have these custom resolvers and to add business logic through serverless functions. But in the end, the big realization that we had was the most flexible abstraction that we can give to people, and our target audience still is developers. The best abstraction is just code. And we wanted to give them the right tools so that they can reach their goals in the fastest way possible, but like not at the extent of giving them something generated that they cannot break out of. And that's exactly what we are now working on with Nexus, where we are striving to integrate Prisma with Nexus so that you can expose everything that you define in Prisma basically on the database level. You define it once and then you're able to expose it in your GraphQL API, but at the same time, you don't have to. You can customize it, you can implement your own resolvers, and it feels very natural because that's the way how you would implement a GraphQL API anyways. So that was kind of our reasoning for that shift from that perfectly, like the perfect generated box for you that had this CRUD GraphQL API inside of it, to now a more flexible approach where at the moment you have to do more work, but you're also a lot more flexible in the things that you want to do.
Perfect explanation. By the way, I switched our banner. I don't know if you're still watching the...
I do. I'm actually lagging a couple of minutes behind, and that's super confusing for me.
Okay. But yeah, it was just weird. We were just talking in the opposite direction. For people who are joining in, he is Nikolas Burke. I'm the Kitze. Next time, I'm going to have a layout with the name switch, just in case if the guests will be facing the other direction. Anyway, that was a perfect explanation. Somebody is asking, just answer this with yes or no. You don't have to dive into it. If the migration tools from Prisma 1 to Prisma will be available in the next month or two. Yes or no?
In the next month or two, yes.
Yes, perfect. Just mirror his cam or flip. Samuel, you would think it's easy to mirror a cam or flip in OBS. It's not. If somebody knows the shortest way to flip a cam, I would do it. Flybuyer is hopefully still here in the chat, and he said a lot of Upwork gigs for switching off GraphQL. I am actually looking to hire a person who's gonna help us with migrating, and basically it's some of them are personal projects, some of them are CZ and React Academy projects, to migrate all the Prisma 1, Heroku, and what else was involved there? Prisma 1, Heroku, whatever, to move it to another hosting provider and just use Prisma 2 and Nexus. So if you are that person and you are a freelancer or whatever, you want to work part-time, just DM me on Twitter or my email. I'm just going to leave the email here. So whoever's watching this is my email. We can just chat. Because, yeah, it's actually, like, after that many migrations, it is a pain in the ass to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to take 2 weeks off just to migrate everything, and drop the Heroku service and whatever, and migrate to Prisma, the new Prisma, basically. What else do we have? Good things can come from experimentation. Prisma had to experiment to get to where it is today. Yeah. What is Prisma business model with that new product? Yeah, a lot of people brought up this question. Let's just answer it. You don't have anything that's paid. What is your strategy if you want to unveil it here? You don't have to. You can be like, skip, fuck it.
We actually have an FAQ about that in our docs. And the answer is very short. Is that right now we are very much focusing on just the open source tools, and the open source tools at any point in time should be enough for you to build mission critical and production ready applications. So that's kind of a statement that we want to be true forever. But then what we are going to focus on in the future is to build out a new Prisma cloud offering that helps you with these kinds of database workflows that you have with Prisma. And these will be especially targeted at teams and bigger organizations. So one idea, and I'm just really spitballing here, I'm not saying that anything of this is actually going to come, but like one idea would be that because you have your Prisma schema in your GitHub repo and you commit it every time when you push to master or to push to a different branch with a PR, in the same way that kind of you get these preview URLs with Netlify or with Vercel, in the same way we could give you a preview URL for your database, or just like a better team-based access for different database workflows. We have a lot of ideas there, but ultimately what we're going to build will also very heavily depend on how our users are actually using the open source tools and what kind of value we can provide to them additionally to these open source tools with kind of a web-based cloud platform. So it'll depend a lot on the workflows that will crystallize over time. And I can spitball here, but this is like these are just the random ideas that we have today, but it'll refine over time.
I'm actually on board with that, and I was actually telling you that 24/7. Please charge me for things. I would gladly pay, I don't know what amount per month, if you actually have one cloud thingy solution where I can do all of it in the cloud. Like, I get the transformation, but I still think the next step is to combine all of the tools that you have and form a cloud and make people pay for this instead of them. Like right now, if I want to host a database, I'm gonna, Johannes mentioned Render, and not me or Nikolas or Johannes are affiliated with Render in any way. But it seems like a human way to do things. That's why I love Render. I moved all of my services to Render. Like from Vercel to Netlify, everything is on Render right now. I still haven't seen how are they hosting a database. So maybe I want to, you can answer that here. If right now, because you don't have the Prisma cloud or whatever your business model is going to be one day, if you would point people to host their database somewhere, Johannes mentioned Render. Would you also recommend Render, and would it work with the connections limit that the new Prisma has? Because Johannes said like, oh, it's going to work out of the box. You don't have to fix anything. Is that true, or?
I'm not the right person to talk about that, to be honest. I don't know much about Render.
Okay.
I have seen host people their databases on Heroku, on DigitalOcean, and I think we had these issues with the connection limit for a while, especially in the preview version. But by now, I think we're like largely out of that space, and you have more control over that. So I think these kinds of issues should be largely resolved by now, and you can host your database pretty much wherever you want.
Okay, I just know that in the Redwood docs, when I was reading the Redwood docs, which are pretty fine, by the way, at the end of the guide.
Yeah, the tutorial is amazing.
It is amazing.
Going through the tutorial. Yeah. It's just the perfect kind of tutorial, super well written.
Yeah.
Very.
I still haven't tried it because I, like, you know, when you get burned once and now you don't want to just try new stuff, it's like, nope, let me just wait until they stabilize. But in the deployment stuff here, like, you have a bunch of shit that you need to deploy. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, it's mentioning this because it's using, actually they don't, wait. Redwood is using Prisma, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so they're mentioning
and they're
this.
talking about hosting it on, or hosting the application server in serverless functions. I think that's their main deployment model, that they build and structure the entire app so that it can run in Lambdas. I think that's kind of the main idea behind that.
Oh.
And there used to be a couple of issues when deploying Prisma Client to AWS Lambda, but we actually have a guide for that in our documentation. So I can actually quickly drop the link for how you can deploy an application that's using Prisma Client to Lambda.
So that's
and like
only
what you have to be aware of there.
Okay.
So I think like that should resolve most of the issues and answer the questions that come up there.
Okay. If I'm using a traditional server, because I got this a couple of times in development actually. So a couple of weeks ago, I deployed my database to DigitalOcean. I didn't use PG Bouncer or whatever the tool is for bouncing a bunch of connections. And after a couple of restarts of the server, I started getting that issue. It said like connection limit, cannot blah, blah, blah. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I don't know if Johannes or someone else mentioned that, hey, Prisma 1 took care of that for you. Now you have to take care of the connections limit yourself, which is, you know, when you pilot it, oh, it's one more thing that I have to think of. So if I deploy a traditional server, Node.js right now, with the way that you would do it with Apollo or whatever, do I need to think about this connections issue? Because there's going to be one server connecting to the database, or is it just going to work on any hosting?
So if you deploy it to a traditional server, there should be much less friction and you don't have to explicitly set the connection limit yourself. I mean, what the connection limit ultimately is determines the size of the connection pool that's used by Prisma Client in your application. So that's what the connection limit argument is that you can provide to Prisma. If you deploy to serverless functions, then it's a little bit different. And there you probably want to set or like limit your connections to a number of 1 so that they can be reused across different like Lambda invocations, and they don't go stale like once the like function has been invoked.
Yeah.
But on a traditional server, it should be completely fine, and you don't have to care about that yourself typically.
Yeah. When I got that deprecation notice from Now 2.0, I actually looked a little bit about GraphQL and Lambda and serverless, and my conclusion is fucking not worth it, especially the way things are right now. Like I would happily perfectly pay $15 to $20 per backend server if I can have a traditional backend server without thinking about all of that shit. So what you sent me is so it is possible to deploy to AWS Lambda. That's nice. There's a bunch of instructions here. You can see them in the chat. However, Nexus, I think right now, there's either an open issue, something about serverless. I'm not sure. Deploying to AWS, it's an old issue or something. What are the plans with Nexus, like the overall plans? Because right now, if I would want to use Now 2.0 in serverless, I don't think that Nexus has any docs regarding that. Because most of the tutorials or online are about Apollo and serverless. So if you Google like Apollo serverless, you're gonna see all of those things. Deploying to AWS Lambda Apollo server. You see this. But I was like, oh, cool, that should be simple enough. Wait, I'm using Nexus. So it shouldn't be that hard, but still.
Yeah, I think that there also, like recently was a tweet by Guillermo, who also hinted at a couple of issues that you have when you deploy GraphQL servers to Lambdas in general.
Yeah.
So I think like one thing that you can do when you deploy to Lambda, for example, are subscriptions, right?
Yeah.
So subscriptions require a long-running process and can't be implemented with just this kind of deployment model. So there are a couple of gotchas, but in general, I think it should be possible if your GraphQL server just serves queries and mutations, but it might not be as straightforward as hosting it on your, like on a traditional server. Like I personally probably would go with a traditional server at the moment, just because like I know what I'm getting into when I do that.
I would advise any maker who's watching this right now, if you want to get shit done, like go and get shit done, I would definitely recommend for you to go to with a traditional server, skip all of that crap, actually build something, charge people, make money, solve problems. Because if you like have an idea and a problem that you want to solve, once you go down this rabbit hole of, okay, I'm going to use GraphQL, oh, maybe also serverless, maybe also Prisma, the more stuff you pile up, you're never going to ship your product. So that's why I want to, you know, simplify my stack and just not refactor when a refactor is not needed. Anyway, we decided we're going to do this for 1.5 hours, but we had some streaming issues, so we're going to continue for 15-20 more minutes because we started a bit late. We can go like run through some of the questions just to somebody asked about web security, GraphQL versus REST. I don't think that's a point of discussion of this stream. Somebody answered in the chat, the app will be secure as much as you make it. Personally, I'm using GraphQL Shield for all of my apps. And Nikolas, that's a question for you. Does GraphQL Shield work currently? I know that Nexus might have its own approach, or it might have it in the future. What is the state with GraphQL Shield and Nexus? I'm gonna post it in the chat here.
To my understanding, GraphQL Shield should work with Nexus, just as it works with any other GraphQL tool and GraphQL server library. And that's mostly because what Nexus does, it just creates the GraphQL schema instance for you. And that GraphQL schema instance can then be, it can be augmented with GraphQL Shield so that you can restrict access inside of your resolvers. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, I was looking at the Nexus docs this morning, and I actually think there already is a plugin for GraphQL Shield. I might be wrong, but I'm looking at the docs right now.
Yeah, somebody said it in the chat. When
there is a plugin for
I think
GraphQL
that's Wiki,
Shield.
if I remember so GraphQL Shield Nexus plugin. Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Like, it feels to me that it should become a built-in thing. Yeah, but as a plugin, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I love the idea of the new Nexus plugins. I was just looking at the architecture and how do they work and how do they plug in. Like, I love that you can just plug in the Prisma plug. How many times did I say plugin? I love that you can plug in the Prisma plugin and you don't have to configure shit ton of things. As much as that's like a blessing, on the other hand, can be a problem. So far, never had problems with it. I like it. How does this thing work? Permissions, Shield, use permissions. Oh, you just use it from Nexus. Cool. Cool. That and perfect. Love it. Nothing to add there. Let's move on. Somebody asked web security. I wanted to mention Blitz and Redwood. So maybe Flybuyer is still here. He's working on Blitz. Never tried Blitz. Never tried Redwood. I love the idea of both of them. What is your, maybe as a company, what do you think about them? Do you work with them? Do you talk to them about some changes? Because I think Johannes or someone said in the Slack that they're gonna take care of the end user experience for you. I think I'm losing you a little bit on Zoom, so might be something with your connection. But if you can hear me fine, you can answer. Yeah.
So I can hear you fine, but I'll quickly switch.
Can you... Anyone who's on the stream, can you see and hear me fine? I think he's glitching out, something that's going on with Zoom. I think so. I think he's gone. No, don't leave me like that. What am I gonna tell people? Okay, so while he's not here, let me tell you. You need to migrate as soon as possible. As soon as you can pick your stuff up, just move to... No, I'm joking. I'm still gonna use it. Recommend it to everyone. Oh, he's gone. No. What did you do to me? No, okay, he's back. He's back. I don't have to move over there and fix it. Okay, I was just telling people never to migrate from Prisma. It's fine. Blitz Redwood.
Yeah.
Johannes said, let me, just to use whatever he said. They invest a lot in making things smooth for the end user, whatever that means. How is your relationship? Because I just hope and pray they're going to become big. I just hope they join forces and work together. I don't care who wins in the long run. They can coexist. But I see that as the way things moving forward. I see it as something that I would use for all of my apps. I don't know which one. How close are you going to work with them? And what are your thoughts? Just what are your thoughts on them in general?
So we do work with both teams. So the team from Redwood is Tom Preston Werner and a couple of his teammates, I think from Chatterbug, the company that he's currently working on. And we have regular calls with them. We have a dedicated Slack channel where they ping us with questions, and we collaborate. And we are aware kind of the plans that they have, and we try to give them kind of the extra support which they need in order to build these kinds of tools. And the same also with Blitz. So we are also in touch with Brandon. We also have a shared Slack channel with him where he can ask questions. So we have a very good and close relationship with these people, I would say. And I personally don't have a strong opinion on which one I find better either. I mean, they are pretty different in the sense that the architecture of Redwood, I mean, it includes a GraphQL API, which is completely factored out with Blitz. And Blitz, on the other hand, it's also based, I think, on Nexus. So you kind of remove that entire...
It is? I didn't know that. Flybuyer, if you're still here. I'm probably butchering your name constantly. Is it Brandon? I'm just calling you Flybuyer. Okay, that's a thing now.
Yeah, so it's built on Next.js. I was just pulling up the website, and it is indeed built on Next.
It's built on Next. It's not built on Nexus. I heard you. It's built on Nexus. I'm like, that's way too many abstractions. Yeah.
No. It's just on Next. And what they do, they remove the entire API layer. So they basically, if I understand correctly, they resolve all your data requirements from the database at compile time. Mm-hmm. And then they can send that out to the front end. But I haven't used it, and probably you should have another show with Brandon here to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I scheduled a stream with him in a couple of weeks, I think, or I don't know, but soon, some Friday. So make sure to subscribe to this Twitch channel, YouTube, wherever you're watching this. We're gonna have a stream on Blitz soon. Thank you for that answer. Blitz doesn't use Nexus. Yeah, I misheard it. I thought he was saying Nexus. It's Next.js, and actually that's why I think I'm more in favor of Blitz winning that race, because it's already based on Nexus. I don't want people branching out again. Now a bunch of people are gonna be like, I'm gonna use Remix Run or whatever it's called from Michael Jackson, Ryan Florence. A bunch of people are gonna be like, I'm gonna use Redwood. And I like that you're actually building Blitz on top of something that a lot of people in the community established as a standard. So yeah, in 2 weeks, we're going to set up a stream. I'm super excited about it. We're going to talk more. A couple of people are asking about hosted Prisma and so on. He already answered that question. He said that at some point, their goal is to be profitable and to have this kind of service and model there where you're going to host your database APIs and everything else. But on the other hand, like if you could already host your database on whatever, render, and host your backend on whatever, I kind of see why it's none of your business to host those things anymore. Except like there's an opportunity for you to make a lot of money from them. But I see it now. I'm like, I can just point my schema file to point to my database. That's it. What would be the major advantage? What would be the major advantage?
So to be clear, I don't think that we will offer any kind of hosting soon, it's not really on the roadmap at the moment. What we're planning with Prisma Cloud is not a hosting service, neither for your database nor for your application server. And the Prisma server, it doesn't exist in Prisma 2 anymore, so there also is no need to host that. So what Prisma Cloud is going to be, it's going to be for your workflows. It'll improve your workflows, but has nothing to do with hosting. And that's a little bit different from what Prisma 1 used to be, but that's what we're looking at with Prisma 2 Cloud.
Cool. We already discussed Prisma Migrate, so we don't need to discuss that again. We have Prisma and the GraphQL future. Like, because right now you distance yourself a little bit from GraphQL. I mean, your Prisma Labs is still working on Nexus. But when people ask, does Prisma come with anything any GraphQL or whatever outside of the box, you cannot say yes. You can say, yeah, Prisma has a plugin for Nexus. Prisma has a plugin, whatever was that framework, Nest framework or whatever, but you don't have anything to do with GraphQL. So one thing that people are going to miss, and I don't know if it's going to be your business to solve, is subscriptions. Thoughts? Are you working on something? Do you have any plans? Because I actually have 2 apps that are relying on a lot of things being real time, and it's such a bummer that I cannot use this. But maybe you have something for me. I don't know.
Right. So subscriptions is a tricky topic. And the way how we currently think about it is that we might eventually build an events engine into Prisma 2 that kind of gives you these real-time notification when something is happening in the database. But this is, to be honest, very far out. So we are now focusing on Prisma Client, we're focusing on Prisma Migrate, and we're focusing on the right workflows. And we're by far not at the point in time where we can focus on that events engine. So we don't have anything out of the box for people there at the moment. But it always depends on, like, how do you want to trigger your subscriptions? Is it okay for a subscription to be triggered whenever a mutation arrives, or does it have to be a database event? So like these kinds of things are already important to distinguish. And if you want to trigger a subscription just when a mutation is coming in, this is one line inside of your mutation resolvers to trigger a subscription. So that shouldn't be a problem at all to implement that yourself. If your subscriptions are supposed to rely on actual changes in the database, in that case, you might have to go and drop down to the lower level and configure native SQL triggers that will fire, and that is going to fire your subscription then.
That sounds
like these are in general the two kinds of approaches that you can take. Probably for the vast majority of use cases, triggering subscriptions inside of your mutation resolvers will probably be enough. And for the rest, we are working, or we will hopefully be working on that in the future with that events engine to solve that entire topic of real-time API for your database. But that's not at all where we are at the moment and where we are focusing our time.
I like that you have someone is like, Kitze hears SQL and goes, nope, nope, nope. Because I'm constantly trying to force my brain to think of the future. 10 years from now, will people write an SQL statement to have real time? No, it's going to be like, anytime I have a user in my database, do this thing. But in my mind, it's configured through some sort of magical UI. That's why I'm making that face when someone mentions like native SQL, whatever. I get that the low level will stay there, but I'm trying to find all the tools and all the stuff that will, like, I'm going to go back to the first point of the discussion. When I said GraphQL was enabling, like it enabled me to build an app for my business to go out to make money without me knowing all of this shit. So this entire service, like Prisma, whatever it's going to be, has to become enabling again. So it includes as many people as possible. Oh, you don't know native SQL? No problem, we got you. Oh, you don't want to host your thing on Heroku? We got you. You don't want to think about cron jobs or whatever? We got you. Like, you're going to enable more people to actually solve problems. And I think that's a great mission statement to have. You're going to be like, we want, if someone is like, no, bro, we're going to write SQL forever, be like, fuck that, that's not our target. I'm not going to convince that person to move to our own services, but you could be the people who actually satisfy the middle, basically the people who are, I know a bunch of stuff, I am a developer, but I also want to set up this stuff in a really easy way. And you can be for the people who like, I don't know shit about backends, I would still be able to do a backend with. That's what you were able to do with GraphQL, and that was amazing to me. And that's how I see the future. Like, a lot of these people are gatekeeping. They want to keep things the old way. They're like, when I saw GitHub code spaces, we're going to discuss them tomorrow on This Week in Web Dev, I was like, fuck yeah. Because a lot of people would be able to start a React app or whatever without knowing about the terminal, ZSH, about, I don't know, some weird configs, installing Yarn or whatever. They'll just be able to learn and write a React app. And I think that Prisma is on the right path of becoming that, but for databases. Like 5 years from now, I would love to have a call with you again and be like, see, we are the people who made humanity never write raw SQL again. Like, that would be fucking amazing. I think that's the direction it should head to, but we'll see. What do you think? Let me see the chat. You're using... I feel 10 years from now, it likely SQL will still be a thing. I don't know about Prisma. Subscriptions should be GraphQL. Like, there was a depressing... When I had this discussion about UI versus CLI, somebody said the most depressing thing that I've ever heard in my life. They said, UI is temporary, the terminal is here forever. Just imagine that future. Just imagine the future. 10 years from now. If 10 years from now... No, if 5 years from now I have to open a terminal, I'm gonna quit web dev. So just take my word for that. If 5 years from now I have to touch a terminal, I'm gonna quit web development forever. And all of my businesses are not gonna be based on web development. I'm gonna become a magician or some shit. So how can people have statements like SQL will be here forever? No, it fucking won't. Just like assembly, like we're not writing web apps. Like, don't trigger me on this. People know how to push my buttons and people know how to push my buttons. So fuck this discussion. Yeah, let's just discuss like about the future. 5 years from now. Let's talk about 5 years from now. I think it's a nice thing to wrap up the stream with. 5 years from now, where do you want... It's like a job interview. You're going to work for me and I'm like, 5 years from now, where do you want Prisma to be?
So what we are working towards is really that Prisma is becoming the default for your database workflows. So we indeed are looking towards that world where you don't have to write SQL again. And I really like that comparison of like putting SQL into the same kind of level of abstraction as assembly that we don't care about today anymore. Because on the one hand, of course, it is very, very powerful. You can do a lot of things with it. But on the other hand, it's also incredibly complex. And it's also not very expressive. It's not, you cannot actually express your goals with the primitives that you get from these languages, because what you care about is you want to create features that provide value to your users. But instead you have to think about how you're composing a SQL query so that it runs properly and fast. And that's not really like how you should think about things. So I think that we want to raise the level of abstraction, and we want to build an abstraction that feels right, that makes developers more productive, and that gives them more confidence in their database workflows in general, so that they know kind of what they can expect from the database when they're sending a query, and what is coming back and what the behavior is going to be. And I think that's a problem with SQL today, that like whenever I have to send a raw SQL string, be it from a Node app or in like PostgreSQL or some other GUI database client, it always feels brittle. I never know 100%, is this now the right query? Is this the right structure to achieve my goal? Or is this now something different and will behave in some weird ways? So I think in that sense, actually, Mongo was already a step forward because it allowed developers to think in objects. But I think a big problem that Mongo has is just that there is no schema with Mongo. And I think a schema is kind of required wherever you do development, be it in your database, be it in your API with GraphQL, or like you could even go so far that TypeScript is a schema for your code as well, right? You define types, you define a schema for what the structures in your code look like. So the schema for me is an indispensable part of doing development work that's maintainable. And that's where we want to get to. We also want to build this kind of end-to-end fully type-safe stack where it starts with the types on your database level and everything else falls out of that. Your GraphQL types, the types that you use in your front end when you access the GraphQL API. That's kind of the vision that we're working towards.
Love it. I love the discussion that's going on. Put all of your data in a giant schema-less JSON document. It's perfectly seen. Never been a fan of it. Like the only database I was using was Postgres, just because there are types and I can just generate. I know what's gonna go in each table. I can generate a GraphQL schema out of it. I can generate my types, and everything feels more safe. That's why I'm not a big fan of Firebase. What I saw with Fauna was also a little bit. They have a schema, but you can also put a lot of shit in the in the collections. You can put whatever you want, and that makes things a little bit shaky for me. But anyway, like this is a long stream already. The goal with the stream is to keep it 1.5 hours. Vani Shu said, I just tuned in. The topic of Prisma monetization has been brought up. So if you want to watch that, my video after this is going to be on youtube.com/Kitze, so you can watch the entire video. There are 2 last questions, and we're going to stop the questions now. However, we're going to have a new stream soon with Johannes. We're going to continue the questions. When is dynamic data sources coming? Just the shortest answer you can have, just so we can wrap up. When are dynamic data sources coming?
I assume dynamic data sources refers to removing the provider and just having it be inferred in the URL. I think that's an open GitHub issue that's planned for the near future, but to be honest, I can make a clear statement on that.
Fair enough. And can I have manual transactions? This is the last question we can answer. Can I have the manual transactions for edge cases like in SQLize? Can I do that in Prisma? Like if you're like, fuck it, I want to do my own. I mean, you can do that against your database, right? This has nothing to do with Prisma. Or...
yeah, so like if you want to do a transaction at the moment, you can't do it with Prisma because we don't expose a transaction API. What you can do is use these nested writes that create multiple related records in a transaction, but you can't create your own transactions that is kind of long running where you send data back and forth. That's currently not possible, but we have open GitHub issues. So I'd be super curious to hear your use cases in there and like learn more about this so that we can factor it in when we plan these features.
Perfect. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me. And I'm going to bring up something that I brought up first time. Prisma's customer support and the level of patience that you have is amazing. And I thought that after that stream I did, I was like, these people are going to be done with me. They're like, fuck that guy. He's too angry. But everyone just took it so chill. We're having this discussion. That's why I love the Prisma community. So I'm in every single... I've done like 15 GraphQL workshops so far. And in every single workshop, without Prisma sponsoring you or anything, I'm bringing up the topic. I'm like, if you're going to make your life easier, just go with Prisma. So I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to continue... As I said, this is the best time to start with Prisma because finally they're on the right track. Finally, things are becoming stable. So yeah, go ahead and try it. Join the Slack community because the Slack community is super responsive. People are helping each other. I don't know how they can join the Slack community, but if you Google Prisma Slack, probably that will come up. You can follow Nick at Nikolas Burke on Twitter. I put the link here. It's slack.prisma.io, I guess. Yeah, slack.prisma.io if you want to join the Slack. Before Nikolas finishes up, one last thing. You know I have to plug this in, right? Because I'm busting my ass. We are busting our ass working on this. So go ahead, and if you haven't seen it, we are releasing our biggest update ever this week. Not gonna drone on about it. It's just gonna be insane. I'm gonna post a video soon. Go check out CZ, the browser for developers at cz.co. We're gonna this update is gonna change everything. So I don't have anything else to plug. You can follow me on twitter.com/thekitze Nikolas. However you want to end this. We can end the stream and we can keep chatting a little bit on Zoom. If you want to plug something, if you want to say something to people, however you want to end this, I'm out. Putting all the pressure on you.
I think it was great here on the stream, Kitze. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So we're going to, as I said, we're going to schedule another stream. I will see you guys tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Central European Summertime. We're going to do This Week in Web Dev, and we're going to discuss what happened this week in Web Dev. Again, thank you.